Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Thomas, and I'm the Director of Programs at the US Latinx Art Forum. As we begin this event, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral grounds I reside on in support of Indigenous peoples' ongoing stewardship and struggles to protect their cultural resources and homelands. I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Dakota and Ojibwe peoples. Please take a moment to identify and recognize the Indigenous people who have always and continue to steward the land from which you're joining us. The US Latinx Art Forum champions artists and arts professionals through initiatives that advance the vitality of Latinx art and foster an intergenerational network that spans academia, art institutions, and collections. In 2021, we launched the Latinx Artist Fellowship, which awards $50,000 in unrestricted funds to each member of a multi-generational cohort of 15 artists each year for an initial commitment of 5 years. It's the first significant prize of its kind, and it celebrates the plurality and diversity of Latinx artists and aesthetics. It's designed to address the systemic and long-standing lack of philanthropic and institutional support for Latinx artists, and we are honored to be a partner for this groundbreaking initiative and are grateful to the Mellon and Ford Foundations for their support. 2025 marks the 10th anniversary of USLAF's founding, and we're thrilled to celebrate a decade of programming and initiatives that have fostered a dynamic community of artists and interlocutors. It's now my pleasure to welcome you to X's Intersections. X's intersection, Chicanx, expressions, past, present, and future. This series gathers our fourth cohort of fellows into conversation with curators and members of USLAF's executive committee, who all share a sustained commitment to Latinx art. Today's conversation marks the final event in this year's series, and I encourage you to visit uslaf.org to view past recordings, check out our other initiatives, and learn how you can support our work. And with that, it's a pleasure to introduce you to our co-moderators for today's conversation. Cesáreo Moreno, Visual Arts Director at the National Museum of Mexican Art, and Josh T. Franco, Collector at Large at the Smithsonian's Archives of American Art and Associate Director of Special Projects at the US Latinx Art Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Hello to everyone. It's so nice to see so many names of friends of the archives, of USLAF, of myself in the attendee list. Thanks for joining us. The three artists in conversation today make work that demonstrate a wide range of Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx expression. While Sandy Rodriguez and John Valadez share the language of painting, one asks us to re-enter large-scale historical moments, such as wars and political border making, while the other invites us into particular moments from his life and direct observation. They also employ different materials. Valadez works with commercial products, thus inserting his sensitive, personal scenes into long-standing painting convention, while Rodriguez collaborates with the earth itself to produce paints and turns to amate paper as her surface, rather than conventional canvas. Alberto Aguilar brings a Mexican-American in-between subjectivity and gaze to bear on the histories of minimalism and conceptual performance art. Today, he will share with us some of his explorations of found architectural space, public participation, and the grid, that modernist hallmark. Along with Cesáreo, I am thrilled to enter into dialogue with these three very exciting artists, and I'll hand it over to Cesáreo now to introduce them further.
Thank you, Josh. Today we'll hear from these three artists one by one, and then afterwards we will have the opportunity to listen in as the three of them enter into conversation and questions together. The order of today's presentations will be Alberto Aguilar. He is a Chicago-based artist that uses life stuff as pliable material to create meaningful connections with the viewer. In addition to receiving the Latinx Artist Fellowship, Alberto has received the 3 Arts Award. He is the 2024 Artist in Residence at the Chicago Humanities Festival, and he has shown at various museums, galleries, storefronts, and street corners around the world. Sandy Rodriguez is a Los Angeles-based Chicana artist and researcher, exploring cultural knowledge, history, memory, and geopolitics. Her work incorporates 16th century Mexican codices, maps, and current politics. She received the 2024 US Latinx Art Fellowship, the 2023 Jacob Lawrence Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the Hannah and Russell Culley Distinguished Fellow in the History of American Art at the Huntington, 2025 and 2026. John Valadez, he is a painter, photographer, and muralist living in Los Angeles, a trailblazer of the early Chicano arts movement in the 1970s and 1980s. His work has come to define an iconography of Chicano experience in the city by catalyzing its changing dynamics and reconstructing a mythical allegory that speaks to an alternative vision. And so now we will turn it over to Alberto.
And I'll just jump in. That's the way it usually goes. I just throw myself into a situation, and here I am. So, and the other thing is, I'm not really showing what one might call iconic works, apart from maybe this first one that I'll talk about on the left. I've been working with a person who makes these this company that makes these hand-painted signs, which I've been familiar with all my life. I actually grew up, my parents owned the first Mexican grocery store in Cesáreo, Illinois, which is now, over 90% Mexican, I would say Latinx. But so I was invited to be in this show in St. Louis, Missouri. It was called Counterpublic. They had sites for all the sites along this main drag called Cherokee Street, where they allowed artists to show works in these public sites. And right when I saw the Mexican grocery store, I was excited and I knew exactly where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. So I created these hand-painted signs, and I looked up every possible cognate words that could be read in Spanish and English simultaneously, because I was interested. This neighborhood is back then, and probably still now, was experiencing gentrification, and I wanted to, try to speak to as many people as possible. And so all these words that I chose can be read simultaneously in Spanish and in English, but they follow an ABA structure. So in English, local patron, right? In Spanish, patrón local. And the other thing is that they mean different things depending on what language you're reading them. And this is just there were 9 signs or so, I don't remember exactly, but they went across the entire facade of this Mexican grocery store. And I really enjoyed the ones that spoke to the gentrification that was happening on that street, like inevitable invasion and invisible crises. So I still work with this sign painter, but this last time I decided that I was not going to ask them to, and they're very masterful at the making of these signs. But this last time, I decided not to have them do the painted signs. So the thing in the center is actually a text message. I was texting back and forth. I have these text exchange with people, I guess, willing to reciprocate. That's one of my sort of like prompts. If there's a person who's willing to reciprocate, willing to go back and forth in communication. We sometimes have this exchange that started off as photographic exchanges without words. But in this case, they were text messages that I was sending back and forth as visual form. And so this is the center one is an example of this word flailing. And I like when the word reflects the action that's being described. So the text has this feeling that it's actually flailing, right? Like the limbs are flailing. So that's a screenshot of the text image. And then on the right, I decided I was going to have the sign painter make aluminum signs on the street signs. It's like street sign aluminum material, and it's reflective. So these are some of the text exchanges that became like street signs that I actually hung in my most recent show, which was titled A Factual Account. Probably my favorite two, because there was also two more of these that I did not include. But my favorite two, which I think of as a couple, is remembered. So making it as a triangle, kind of like a monument. And then dismembered, which I guess shares the root word or shares a similar spelling. But I was really like excited about like creating this form of a figure with a missing leg. And failing is a more obvious one where the G fails to match up with the word failing. But I'm very much into language and the way that language could take on visual form. So that's what's going on here. And I'll just talk about the next images. Yeah, so recently, I also chose things like I wanted to choose things that were like happening sort of right now in my current time. Although it's important to look back at your work, like I'm always looking forward and I'm always sort of caught in the current moment and most excited about the current moment. So when they asked me to give images for this presentation, I was actually in Mexico City for 2 weeks, and I haven't been there since I was a very small kid. So I was really, really excited to be there. And right when I got there, I was making these gestures, these body gestures all over the city, wherever I felt compelled to do so. And my daughter was with me for the full 2 weeks, and she was photographing me doing these gestures out in the landscape. Not these, though. These images were outside of the Museo Jumex, the Jumex Museum, where there was a large show. It was like a retrospective of the work of one of my favorite artists, Gabriel Orozco. And the show was just like really amazing and inspiring. And as soon as I left the museum, I just was kind of compelled to fill my body, or they had this like void area, this area that kind of is a canopy at the entrance of the museum. And I thought that I would fill that space with my body. But then I also thought that, and because it's not it's not like a great big, like a monumental gesture, right? But, like sometimes I just have to follow the lead, follow these ideas that I have, even though they're not the greatest ideas. Like sometimes you just have to do it. Sometimes I just have to follow through on this idea that I have. So as I was doing it, I thought, wow, it'd be interesting to ask strangers to photograph me doing this. So I did it 10 times around the perimeter of the museum entrance. And I would ask strangers to photograph me doing this gesture. And of course, for me, it's uncomfortable to go up to strangers to ask them to do this, but it just made sense. And so this is me in the front entrance on the left. This is me somewhere, the middle image is me somewhere in the middle of the building. And, like the people who are taking these photos, they're, of course, not, to my knowledge, they're not trained photographers, right? So I kind of like the way that people choose to photograph me. This is just a selection of the 10, like the center one. I mean, I like the first one because it shows the title of the museum. The second one, there was, you could see that there was actually people going in and out of the museum, and I kind of liked how I split these people on the bench. And then the left one on the right, the person who photographed me actually asked if they could pull my shirt down so that you could see the text of my shirt. And whenever people, have ideas or ask me, can I do this? Of course, I welcome it. So that's what's going on there. And like I said, it's not like an ingenious gesture, because it's not always about, for me, it's not always about having this sort of ingenious idea. It's more about just being in the moment. And in this case, incorporating other people into that moment. So I actually, and like a lot of times I don't differentiate between showing at a museum, doing gestures on the street, and then putting them on Instagram, right? So like I think the main forum or the main display of these was when I posted them on Instagram, but now I guess here as well. That for me, that's a valid way of sharing the work and sharing the gestures that I make. We could go to the next one. Yeah, so the other thing is I don't really like flying. So the reason why I stayed in Mexico City for 2 weeks is because whenever I fly, I have this sort of philosophy, I guess, that if I'm going to fly, I'm going to stay in the place as long as I can, as long as I could get away with staying in that place. So I stayed there for 2 weeks. But I love to take the train. So I took the train to Los Angeles one time, and I was going to LA a lot of times because my daughter was going to Occidental College. So the image on the left is me getting off from the train and entering downtown Los Angeles. This is Chinatown, to be exact. And I saw these flowers that fell on the ground, and it just made sense to me to align them, to make a line out of them. And I was really excited, like whenever I'm in a new place, I'm very excited to be there and to make things. I might not like traveling there by plane, but once I get there, that's when the ideas start flowing. So I made this line, and in this image, there's one person looking at it on the right, and then there's one person just walking over it, kind of almost not acknowledging it. And I very much welcome different responses to the public in viewing the work. Like they could ignore it. They could even destroy it if they want. The center image is my home. It's my dining room table. We have a dining room table that was actually created by 2 artists. That's a whole other thing that I won't talk about, but it's a big table, so we could have big dinner parties. My wife Sonia, she bought these chairs from a restaurant that was going out of business, and they were all kind of lightweight chairs. And I realized that at one point I was sitting in my green chair where I do all of my computer work, and I was looking at the chairs, and I thought it would be interesting to arrange them as if they were falling off the table in sort of like a stop motion animation. And they worked only because they were so lightweight, they were able to balance one another. So I shot this photo. The last image that I want to talk about are these oranges in Phoenix, Arizona. I was visiting my mother, And it was during the winter time, and there was an abundance of oranges growing, and people would just give them away and put them in the front of their home and say, please take these oranges. So I love eating fresh fruit. So I took a whole box, and when I was at my mom's house, I thought that it would be interesting to organize them on the front patio of her house, and using the grid as a way to sort of like measure them up against each other. So that's what's going on here. This is a grid of these oranges that are arranged on the tile floor. And, you know, like that, these are I want to show these images that I present to you today, because there's sort of an immediacy to them. Not that they're great images, but just that they really speak of the moment, which is the thing that most excites me when I'm inspired in a moment and I have an idea to do something. And, you know, like we all have a lot of ideas, but I'm very much into trying to capture these ideas as they come to me. And this is what I show you now.
Hello. So my name is Sandy Rodriguez, and I am an LA-based Chicana artist and researcher. I paint visual histories, and my ongoing series, Codex Rodriguez Mondragon, maps resistance to colonial aggression by layering historic and contemporary events. I'm bridging the past and present to critique systems of power and to envision alternative futures. The works draw on 16th century colonial codices and maps produced during the collision of cultures in the Americas, embedding historic narratives within the framework of modern geopolitics, social history, and cartography. Over the next 15 minutes, I will be sharing with you 3 of the over 70 artworks that are on view presently at the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, Florida. This is the center map, which is resistance map of Gulf of Mexico, that was just completed earlier this spring. This is the centerpiece of an exhibition called Currents of Resistance, which is the culmination exhibition of a 2023 Hermitage Greenfield Prize. It was developed over the past 2 years across multiple sites in Englewood, Florida, Joshua Tree, California, and Mar Vista. This multimedia installation is one of the most ambitious, if not the most ambitious, of my entire career, including video, audio, a 40-foot paper panorama, and a cabinet of curiosity. This installation investigates resistance to colonial and environmental exploitation through a very interdisciplinary lens, and makes visible the Gulf's region of intertwined histories of cultural resilience and ecological transformation. While I prepared this proposal in the winter of 2022, when I received the nomination, there were a number of unexpected outcomes. And during the first year working on this particular map between Florida and my studio here in Los Angeles, we experienced an extraordinary record-breaking amount of rainfall. And like many Angelenos, we had flooding and a lot of leaks. Along the left side of this map, you'll see a very faint brown line, and in the center, a brown drip. It sustained a bit of rainwater damage during this record-breaking rainfall in Los Angeles, really reframing the opportunity to engage with climate change as an active participant in the making of this map. I later then collected ocean water from Florida's eastern and western coasts into the hand-processed watercolors to integrate the very life force of the region and symbolizing the dynamic interplay of Atlantic and Gulf currents as a vital force within the ecosystem and historic narrative. This map is really an opportunity to look at moments of resistance over the past several hundred years. Typically with my work, I'm trying to figure out how we arrived at this current moment while looking back at historic sources. I really started doing extensive research on resistance in the South Florida region, going back to the 1500s and understanding all of the failed attempts at colonization from colonial forces. So depicted in this map, you're going to find the Calusa resistance, you're going to find contemporary protests against police brutality in the Gulf region. You'll also see details from the Mixton War in the parts of Mexico. I'm also looking very closely at native plants and fauna from the region, and had done extensive amounts of research both at Stanford, looking at maps within the Rumsey collection, at the Hispanic Society, looking at special collections, at the Huntington Museum, also examining colonial period maps. So it's a combination and a synthesis of both field study as well as historic research to make sense of the current political moment. There are a number of very small detailed vignettes, and I invite you to make a trip to Sarasota to go see the installation, to take a look at this, the latest map in my series, the Codex Rodriguez Mondragon. Let's go to the next slide. In really doing that research about the history of Florida, it was very important for me to understand ways in which of using historic materials, for example, the Florentine Codex, and looking at Book 12, which is of how the war was waged in Mexico, or of the Conquista, depending on which version of the text you're looking at, the Nahuatl or the Spanish. There are some incredible paintings within Book 12 that really tell of how the war was waged in a painting as well as in two texts. I went ahead and borrowed the image of the ship with the Spaniards shooting a gun, and I replaced the indigenous bodies with the bodies of Ponce de Leon and his men. Ponce de Leon was a slaver who made multiple expeditions into the region with a license to go enslave indigenous communities. After multiple trips, he was able to then acquire a license for settling this region. This region had been inhabited and has been inhabited by indigenous communities since the beginning of time. And what I chose to do was include the San Marco cat, which is a symbol of the Calusa community. And upon Ponce's arrival with his entire fleet of ships and material to support and sustain a settlement, the Calusa had been notified by neighboring communities and formed a super alliance to then hold off this invasion. They held off these invasions for over 200 years. And at this moment, when Ponce de Leon and his group of would-be settlers arrived, they got out and they went into a boat, smaller boats, to try to land on shore. Well, the Calusa and allies used poison-tipped arrows, poison from the manchineel tree, which is a little death apple, and they shot Ponce and several of his men. They did not settle in Florida. They ran away, and he dies in Cuba. And so being able to paint a 16 by 22-inch folio of this factual history was an important part of this installation. I will say that there are over 30 works on amate paper and hand-processed watercolor. In this installation view, you can see a small section of a turtle nesting protest, as well as a video. I was able to commission filmmaker Andy Hopper to create a stop-motion of my turtles nesting on the coast, as well as a behind-the-scenes video that you will be able to see in the installation and on my website when I get those images uploaded. In the side installation view, you also see flying fish. Those are the papalomichi that carry the souls of dead warriors. And so it's an important element within the installation to include those as well. I will be doing a full hour-long program June 5th at the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, and I hope that you will join me in learning more about the individual elements of this exhibition. We can go to the next slide. So in addition to the cabinet of curiosity, the videos, the paintings, I wanted you to take a closer look at one of these 8-foot by 4-foot artworks that are part of this panorama. And the panorama being really the precursor to film. I wanted to create an immersive 360 kind of experience where you see the map, 2 protest tear gas paintings on the side, and then a beautiful and kind of hopeful nocturne marinescape. The work that you're seeing on the left, Choreography of Descent #1, was painted over the course of 2 years. While working in Joshua Tree, I took all of the charcoal from my evening fires and I crushed them into a very kind of raw and rough state. So it's very sparkly. It is a variety of aged oak and seasoned wood. And so it's got a very rough and coarse texture that was painted in the studios, like I said, both in Mar Vista and Joshua Tree and in Florida. One of the unanticipated elements of Currents of Resistance is my collaboration with Rennie Harris Dance Company. In 2023, the Greenfield Prize gave both Rennie, a choreographer, and myself the prize to develop and commission a full exhibition. So while I was in Florida in the spring, summer, fall, and winter, I had the opportunity on 2 occasions to paint for a full 10 days while Rennie and his company were rehearsing. And so I would wrap up in the studio and on some of the final days, go into the dance rehearsal space and watch the dancers perform acts from his commissioned performance. There was a moment when we were seated and watching the dancers perform, and they rose up on their tiptoes and they just kind of swayed in a group. And I was moved beyond belief and brought to tears. And it was later during the Q&A section when I asked Rennie, can you tell me a little bit more about that gesture? Can you tell me a little bit more about that posture? And he said, Sandy, you know that's strange fruit. And it really hit me. Both of us really used 2020 as a jumping off point for our commissions. And in thinking about resistance and in thinking about the way in which 2020 and those protests across the country are becoming kind of that civil rights moment of awakening for this next generation, it became crystal clear to me to then use stills from the video to then draw silhouettes, to draw these gestures, and to impose those upon these tear gas scenes from across the Gulf that have been layered upon layered. When you see this work in person, you'll see these very gestural kind of motions and marks that are used to create this artwork. I used some of that choreography in the studio while painting this on the wall and on the floor. But there are 2 years of watercolor layered on this, as well as a number of carcinogenic cobalts and cadmium pastels to really stand in for the tear gas, which has been outlawed for 100 years according to the Geneva Convention, but we're still using them on civilians, on families, on children, on students in not times of war across the United States. We can go to the next slide. Oh, that was it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Valadez. I'm an artist and native of Los Angeles. I'm going to show you the 3 latest works that I have done in the last 2.5 years. The first one is titled Chaos. And the idea and the loose concept for chaos comes from a trip to the Nayarit coastline of Mexico during the Easter week of, I believe, 2022. After experiencing a very pleasant week there with some good friends in a small fishing town of Las Penitas. And we were enjoying, my wife and I were enjoying the very nice lifestyle and the simplicity of the environment. And we landed in LAX after about a week, 5 days. We landed at LAX and we suddenly began to be part of the security of suspicion and demanding necessity of documented proof that we were free Americans. So I was really struck by that, where I came from, and I'm coming home. And I think a lot of inspiration I have is from travels. I think because your mind is opened and you're fresh and again naive in a certain way. So I developed this painting from a clear idea, but it wasn't, realized, obviously. And the painting is divided into two sections, obviously, with the left side painted as a beautiful beach that we just came from, a beautiful shoreline on a clear, sunny day. That's what we experienced. And we see a couple from the area on the left side, either taking a selfie or photographing the pile of figures on the right. And these people, even even the two girls coming from the ocean, are also witnessing the tumult before them. And these four figures came directly from my photography there in La Penitas. And then we have a beach shark or a bonita tuna in the center of the composition, which for me indicates that it is a fishing village, and yet what is this huge thing just sitting there? And there also seems to be a distant storm emerging from the ocean line. And so this section represents the almost paradise effect of the fishing village, though in American standards, it still seems poor and untroubled by the relentless competition of the US side, yet the storm is something impending maybe in the future. And on the right side, we have a society, ours, that has everything materially, but is at war with itself. Hate of the other is the new selective patriotism. I started this section with an older 1960s image of a fight at a wedding. For me, it looked funny. And from this central wedding picture, I worked slowly outward, and I put people piled on each other with figures going in every direction, lashing out at each other. The layers of figures are in different scale and painted from sketch-like to a more developed rendering style. The stairs on the top right is used as a visual escape up and out of the turmoil, with the dogs copulating as my sense of humor. The small figures either falling or floating up is another source for liberation or remembrance of 9/11. The clouds above this section are toxic yellow, and the section is inundated with locusts flying over, under, and around the chaos. The helicopter, almost disguised as locusts, represents the surveillance we are all under. I don't find it necessary to explain the particular meanings for all the various parts of the composition. I leave it up to the viewer to either absorb or ignore. The piece is called Chaos 2024, acrylic on stretch canvas, 84 by 144 inches. And it's currently on view. It's part of the collection and on view at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. Okay, the next slide. This next piece of work, oh, good, it is, I don't have to mention how big it is. Okay, so this is called, obviously, Shipwreck. And the development of Shipwreck is an example of my intuitive instincts played out over time in terms of ideas. I saw this rusted boat moored along the coastline in Northern California on one of my travels. I right away imagined some kind of human drama played out on the deck of the ship, floating in a vast ocean. In the painting, the work I decided to contrast a loosely painted sea, some areas, again, almost sketch-like, with a carefully detailed rendering of the deteriorated condition of the vessel. The theme lends its way towards surrealism, metaphor, and irony. These are areas of work that I enjoy discovering and portraying. The color palette was simple greens, blues, and a bright yellow and lighter blue overall skyline. There are some vague dark shapes of paint undefined beneath the overall sky. This was unintended, but works in added questions and slight mystery, especially when you see it in person. So, I mean, I'm really proud of, like, mistakes are accepted. It's very encouraging. The drama I developed was of a tourist ship gone wrong, showing possible impending doom for the travelers. Not to get too thick, but the setup was to comment on environmental and structural neglect. Yet we are still pretending to function. Tourism is a modern privileged pastime, so I chose to include some travelers that are indigenous placed throughout. All but two are Native women. There's a small group of women huddled inside the central darkened room. You can barely see it, but they're there. And they're inside the central darkened room as if they cannot or are forbidden to get out, and they're covered in rebosos. On the extreme left side is a woman looking back at where the slow-moving ship is perhaps coming from. The dress and bow balanced on her head, with the man seated close by, invokes for me memory, heritage, and melancholy. The central figure in the sombrero is rowing, which seems futile, and for me, again, humorous. The two tourists sitting in trunks towards the front are dangling their feet towards the water. They seem carefree and separate from the others, getting sunburned and waiting for perhaps the next drink. They symbolize the entitlement and privilege association with vacationing. They are not concerned with the condition of the boat or the other passengers, just trying to ride it all out and on to the next adventure. Here I see stubborn persistence and cultural denial. Now, as all that I have just described was interpreted and deciphered for this talk, when I was painting and creating the visual narrative, as it was, as I stated above, intuitive, it becomes an intuitive and trusted journey based on these vague ideas and foggy image forming in my visual synapses. But I had to really discern how to do this in, the English language. So anyway, this is Shipwreck Cruise acrylic on paper. And the last piece, which is the one that I just finished, slide 3, please. This piece it's in my studio. I finally finished it like a week ago. It's called Beasts Don't Rest. And it is inspired portrait spanning 4 decades of my observations and my photography. A lot of my work obviously is based on my personal photography and found imagery. So this is inspired by 4 decades of my observations in downtown LA that I have both lived in and witnessed. of the downtown area, capturing the evolving and often unchanging intersections of drug dependence, mental health, and the homelessness. The figures here are all real. They're all real people. A shopping cart becomes both a home and a vehicle for possessions with the marginalized populations. The flowers in the shopping cart is what I saw and documented in the early 1980s. And for me, adds a poignant contrast of fragility and beauty in unexpected places. And it emanates transcendence and even becomes a form of like a creative memorial. It has taken me a long time to create a work that speaks to this subject. I've always avoided doing a piece of work on the homeless because I didn't know how to do it. But I'm really proud that I finally completed this, and I'm feeling really satisfied with the results. It's not a happy piece, but it's something that I had to get out of my system. So this is the last image. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. We're so well behaved. We have so much time for conversation. This is great. You gave us so much. Sandy, Alberto, you turn your cameras back on. I observed something that all three of you, I think, share is this like, there's no fantasy in any of these projects. It's not like this is not art that is meant to transport anybody somewhere else. It's about what's immediately surrounding you, whether that's historical facts of the place you're in, free citrus, a daily scene you walk by all the time. And I think that's so fascinating and so important to kind of observe and think about because we're all Americanos, Chicanos here too. I wonder about that as an expression of rascuachismo, which is so about that sense of sensitivity to what's immediately available and reimagining it. So I think I want to put that out there as the way to get us started is your relationship to rascuachismo, or just where do you think this sensitivity to your immediate surroundings comes from, and looking at it as a resource, and invite you to speak to each other as well. And Cesáreo, do you want to say anything to open us up?
No, that's perfect. I was also interested in the aspect of travel that so many of them have, and it kind of ties into that idea of looking around what's around you, and whether you're using the raindrops in the ocean water, or you're looking at what you encounter and how it ends up in your artwork. So yeah, please. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, when you mentioned the Rasquatchism of things, it takes me back to when I was becoming an artist and a Chicano at the same time, leaving high school in about 1969, and went to the community college, East LA College. And the challenge was, what is Chicano? And what is Chicano art? And the Rasquatch means that poverty. How do you make creative stuff out of, glue and sand, and stuff like that. So that was the focus about to reflect what people don't want to see, reflect our stories. And that's where the launching point was for me.
And I'll say that in thinking about travel and using materials that are of the place to make a site-specific work of art with the life force of that place, with minerals, with plants, with insects, using the traditional materials of image making in the Americas. The reason why my work is so research-based is because I'm telling factual histories. There's enough fantasy, there is enough mythology, there is enough invention about our history and how we have arrived here. And so being able to thoroughly work with historians, work with conservators, to work with anthropologists, to work with other artists, to tell a factual history of the region that I was invited to paint This exhibition that I created is dedicated to the Florida Board of Governors as an assertion of the factual histories and is a representation of that region. It's a critical response to the recent state policies, including the January 2024 removal of sociology as a core course requirement and the prohibition of state funds for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those initiatives on college campuses. So I'm juxtaposing historic and contemporary true factual histories in this exhibition to underscore the importance of acknowledging and preserving these histories of resilience, resistance, and expressions of the region of the Golfo de Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to address both things. This level of resourcefulness, using whatever I have at hand, I think comes from my mother, who would always do things, who would always have projects, but never really had the the knowledge to do them, to see them out. So she would just do it her way. Our home was struck by lightning one summer, one year, and we got the insurance money to rebuild that space, and she did that all herself. I think she was always so busy with these projects that she put on herself that and then she would, we would go out and play baseball in the alley of our home. So that way of being resourceful and using whatever material I had on hand, I think comes primarily from my mother, building things, without, like experience or prior knowledge. But I think also taking the train, the pink line from Cesáreo to downtown, we would go over these, I would drive over these backyards, and which were mostly the backyards of Mexican Americans. And I would see all this stuff that was just really truly inspiring of, them using like tires for planters, but that's just one example, like using whatever material they had to sort of beautify their backyard. I remember that being very formative to me and very inspiring and exciting. And I think it formed a long-lasting visual language for me. I ended up going to art school and then learning painting, but I think that those were my first languages, using everyday material to make things. In terms of travel, John brought up the idea of us being traveling and almost becoming naive. I really feel that way, like when I travel, like when I'm here in Chicago, like everything, I'm so used to everything. I'm never really that inspired. But when I go to a new place, a place I'm not used to, it's like I'm a new person and everything's fresh and everything's exciting and I could see things clearly and ideas start to flow. So for me, like traveling is it's just is as exciting as those times when I used to drive on the train over people's backyards and see them being resourceful. When I was in Mexico City, like I saw a lot of that stuff going on the street that visually was very stimulating to me and got things moving in my head.
Yeah, Chicana yard art is a whole other thing. We can talk about Alberto sometime. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but do you have questions for each other? Or John, you had something to say?
No, I just what Alberto was talking about is the jardins, the all the different gardens throughout the neighborhoods. Everybody has a little personality, how they take care of their yard. It's flourishing, and it's behind these fences. And sometimes they use ceramic stuff, and yeah, that's very cool. I remember. I mean, I still see it, but that's a very good point. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
So I had a question both for Alberto and for John, and so I'm curious about what you're doing to strengthen, protect, inspire your creative output and your studio time in the current political climate?
Well, I lock the door, that's one thing. And the ideas are there. It's, just sort of keep out the whatever's, even though I read, everything's based on, I read the, I recently read that don't read the news in the morning because it's not healthy for you. But that's what I do every morning is read the latest circus and what's going on and the back and forth. But ideas, think about, like, I'm going to be 74 and I keep making art and I says, how do I do it? It's like, I realize as long as you have ideas, you do your work. It's hard to fake it. I had to go in there, I don't know what to do next. But if you have ideas, that's what motivates it and how it evolves. I try to say in my talk, I mean, it's all written because it's hard for me to articulate because I don't teach and I don't whatever. I just live a very quiet life, because I've designed it that way. That's what my son said, Dad, you made your life like what you do is you do your work and that's it. And I said, yeah, that's what I try to do. And that's what I'm doing at 74. And as long as, like I said, as long as you have ideas and you address those ideas and try to bring them out, there's a certain way of working that I do, and I stick to that. And that's how you do it. And but still the world comes in because you see it in our subject matters and things. So that's how I cope, and play good music.
For me, like I try to keep the ideas flowing. Like I don't want them to stop because, I think that is freedom, a true level of freedom to not be restrained by anything and allow the ideas to keep flowing. Honestly, I mean, I try not to listen to the news or to watch the news. I mean, I still get it. I still see what's going on. Sometimes I give in and I will look at the news and see what's going on. But a lot of the times my daughter brings me everything that's happening. And it's very, very important for her to do that. And I accept it when she brings it in. But honestly, like, I think for me, it's like finding ways to keep the ideas generating, to have a practice that's just generative, that gives people opportunities. Like I'm in my studio right now. One of the things that I do here is I run a artist run space with my other daughter where we invite artists to show work here, to have installations. So it's not just all about me like generating ideas, but giving other people opportunity and voice. And here in this space, people could talk about whatever they want to in their work. And that's just a very important part for me too, to have this space not just be like a bubble that I could hide in, but a space that people could express their ideas as well.
Sandy, how are you? I mean, you sort of answered it, like you're responding immediately to these Florida policies, but how else are you managing?
So, a large component of my research is going out into the field and traveling to distinct regions and doing botanizing. So, looking very closely at the native flora of the specific region and looking for those endemic and endangered native plants that are critical to the health of the ecosystem. And so, if it's a long plant walk, getting to know desert plants that I've met before, but I met them in winter, but now I'm seeing them in spring. So, I'll do detailed drawings and be out with my feet on the ground, listening to the birds, doing the drawings, just connecting to place and feeling kind of smaller in a much larger kind of cosmovision. I'll then go back and I'll research the ethnobotanical uses of those plants and understand why I was so attracted to that one plant. Oh, because it's used as a strengthener in times of war. Or, oh, because it's used to calm your anxiety and digestion in times of major stress. Or, oh, it's used for remedios for a lot of the things like fatigue and exhaustion that we're experiencing at the moment. So it's about spending that time outside and spending that time with plants and then just going deep into the rabbit holes with my books and then talking with people.
Do any of you have any other questions for each other or comments?
I have a question. I want to be an art historian and really get into some of the work too. So Alberto, you sort of edged on this, and like I want to the Museo Jumex filling the space photographs. I was thinking about, I don't want to like, is it institutional critique or not? But a better way to ask it, I was thinking in my head, like, does it matter that it was a museum if that building happened to be a bank, but the architecture was the same? Would that have changed the work? Would it have changed the audience? Because, if they're going to a museum, they might be a little more open already to this funny conceptual thing happening on the street. Whereas if they're going to the bank, they might it might be different. So I wonder if you've thought about that or if you could think about it now.
It definitely could be anywhere. Like it did happen at many, many places with the photos that I shot, with the actions that I did in Mexico City. They weren't always museums. That photo series was of particular interest to me because when I left the Gabriel Orozco show, I was truly inspired because there's a lot of I connect with his work and his gestures. I go to museums often. Whenever I go to a city, I'll go to museums, and I do like doing things inside and around museums because it is and if there is institutional critique that people read in what I'm doing, I'm perfectly fine with that. That's the other thing, that I like leaving things open for the viewer to make their own connections or to draw their own discoveries, I guess. But when I do things at museums, it's kind of like I would love to show work at Museo Jumex, but in my mind, I don't think it's going to happen in the very, very near future, right? So it's kind of a way of me inserting myself within those kinds of spaces, whether it's that museum or a museum in New York or the Art Institute of Chicago. Like I like making gestures in museums as a way to insert myself into that conversation. But yeah, it could definitely happen anywhere. I'm trying to think of other spaces that had happened. I mean, it happens on the streets. It doesn't need to be in museums. But yeah, definitely architecture plays a big part. I love places. I love when I see voids that I could fill with my body. And sometimes that dictates whether I interact with that space or not. If there's a possibility to insert my body within that space in some way or another, I'll take it.
Well, I think what's intriguing with your question is that if you go in front of a bank or maybe a correctional institute, they might react a little different, which I think would be a good challenge for you, and have your daughter ready with the camera if they come out and try to arrest you, because you're touching the front of a bank or the reason why I say this is because I look at a lot of YouTube videos of what do they call those? Where they test the constitutional rights, First, Fourth, Fifth Amendment in in an open space in front of a police department or in front of a Corrections Institute and what the reaction is. That might lend itself. I think that's what I remember. I'm reminded of when you asked, like, what's the difference between a museum, and I like your honesty about doing it in front of museums. Try a bank, try a correctional institute. You might get a different reaction, which I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually went to Havana, Cuba with Cesáreo as part of an exchange that I was invited to be part of. And there it was very different. And I knew right away that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't just do anything because you were very closely watched. And so I came up with this idea that I was just going to do straight lines, like just lines, like lines with flowers on the floor, which is where this line came from. I initially did it in Havana, Cuba, in this sort of designated Wi-Fi area where people were allowed to use the internet at parks. So I was using, like, I tried to be very indiscreet when I was in Havana because I did get the sense that we were always being watched and surveillanced, and that, like, my actions could be really read in the wrong way. So yeah, my solution was to just make straight lines. But it was funny, there was one monument, a very important monument, that I made a straight line in front of with things that just fell from the tree. And even there was police that came up to me and they made this motion, like, keep on walking. So I got the photo of the line, but I couldn't stick around and hang out in that spot.
Universal police language, I guess, huh?
Yeah, there's concerns. Like, see a kid. Yeah. And then the same with Sandy, like what you're showing in that museum in Florida and the environment. Do you ever feel like you're being watched, and what the results are and the political ramifications for the school?
Hi, John.
You
We're
have,
all watched.
oh yeah, of course, but I love to read about Florida. It is fun. And even the Ringling at the circus funded museum, I think that's hilarious. That's cool.
It's an extraordinary museum with incredible staff that have been very supportive of helping me envision and install such a complex installation. That panorama that has the map and the larger 360 panorama also has audio cones, so that when you're walking through it, as you're, like, looking at the tear gas pictures of the dancers in front, you have actual audio from the news sources, from the incidents where federal and local police were tear gassing demonstrators. But then you move over to the next piece and you have a very slow ocean sound looking at these nocturnes with the Calusa masks kind of coming through. So it's a very different exhibition for me, being the first time I was invited to create work about the Southeast. And I'm really excited to share that we're also going to have an exhibition catalog with critical essays by Tatiana Flores and by Aaron Stone, and it'll be out this summer. So I'll be back in La Vida a couple times more before the show closes in August.
No, it's when I was in my 50s, 40s and 50s, I did murals, and I used to teach in the prisons, the male and the female, minimum security, and there was a lot going on, and that's why at my age now, 20, 25 years later, I locked the door, because I have memories, and I want to. And I work, and even though I'm in a theater center, there's a lot of actors around, so there's a lot of theatrics going on. So, in downtown,
One of the main ideas of the three of you being present here is the whole Chicanx, Chicano culture, right? So I guess we should probably ask the three of you how you relate to that culture today. Do you respond to it still? Is it something that that you push against? Is it something that you want to see and try to evolve in? What is el movimiento? What does that mean to you all now? John, obviously, you were there, as you've mentioned, in the early years. Where are we now? Where are you now with that movimiento and the Chicano?
That's a good question. I have friends from San Diego, and we're all considered dinosaurs, Chicanosauruses, because we're like, but it's good to see the younger generations come up and define themselves. That's where Latinx comes from and all that kind of stuff. The whole Chicanada, for me, it's in me. It's like, because that's how I've trained myself, and I dream. When you dream, it's in you. When you dream in that, if you see the world in a certain way. I've learned how to not be so animated. I'm still learning how to not talk so much. I used to be a stutterer. It's not therapy, but it's in me. It's just the way that I have developed, and I've chose to follow at the beginning. And then, I'm a really good injustice collector, not quite as much as I used to be, but I'm really having a really good life. I recommend getting into your 70s, you guys. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Can you define injustice collector, John? That's a phrase.
Yeah, we used to kid about that. This friend of mine that passed away, I used to complain about everything. He says, "You're an injustice collector." I go, "Wow." And then recently I used to think about, I was really a narcissist. I mean, I had no power, but it was all about me, and I sort of like liberated myself from that. It's basically because I was trying to be a viable artist, and I just had I mean, I was in a room with people that, John, I was there with you. I go, "Oh, that's right, huh?" I don't recognize names. I know faces, but I'm getting better, getting better. But yeah, the whole Chicano is in me. There's no limpias here.
It's in the blood.
It's in the beans.
It's in the blood. It's probably in the beans too.
Yeah.
I'm third generation pintora. My grandfather was a painter from Cintalapa, Chiapas. My grandmother from Aguascalientes. Mi mamá from Tijuana. I am a Chicana. I came into consciousness in the 90s. I'm 49 years old, and each generation is going to define what Chicano is. But I feel like the foundation that was established by the generation prior is exactly what we're picking up. It's exactly what we're putting down. It may look a little bit different, but it's only because of the work of your generation, John, that we have been able to expand upon what are those injustices? What are we fighting for? We're still fighting for the same things. It just shifts slightly, generation to generation. The position that we're in the current moment has been repeated cyclically. So we just have a different vocabulary and a different methodology for engaging in those topics to present them to contemporary audiences, but definitely always in reference to the history of Chicano art and the history of el movimiento.
So I am Chicanx, I am Chicano, I am Mexican American, but generally I don't like to put these labels on myself. I don't mind if people put these labels on me, but I think for me, like growing up Mexican American, like it was a very traumatic experience, and like when. Even just learning the two languages, supposedly I didn't talk until I was 5 years old, but when I started speaking, I spoke both languages because my mom spoke to us in Spanish, only in Spanish, and my dad only spoke in English. And it caused me a lot of trauma, I would say, not just that, but just the cultural differences. But I've come to realize over all these years that it's actually my great strength, and it's my I live sort of in this in-between zone that I really enjoy, and that I'm very good at navigating, I would say. But I was going to say that, going to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I was really in the art history classes. We never really learned about the Chicano artists from the 70s. And it wasn't until my daughter went to Occidental College in LA that she told me, you got to read this essay. And she sent me this essay about Asco. And I resisted because it was summertime and I was resting, but she kept telling me I have to read this essay. So I finally read it and I was blown away. I was so inspired and I connected to it very much. When I was invited to be part of the Humanities Fest Artists in Residence, they gave me a giant sort of what do you call it? Like a budget to be able to create all these different events. And my first action was to invite Harry Gamboa Jr. to be the keynote speaker of this event, because I just felt that it was important to bring him here and to have him speak to a younger generation of Chicanx artists here in Chicago, which, we have a big population. And besides that, I also curated this show with my daughter where we had Chicanx artists that are from this generation respond to the works of Asco. So we had this show, and Harry was here, and he came to see the show, and it was very successful. She wrote the essay for the pamphlet. So yeah, I think like Sandy said, it's in me. It's very deep inside of me. And more recently, I think I've been becoming more aware and sort of like getting over some of the trauma that I went through.
Alberto, it's very cool that an essay did that for you. And if you can remember who wrote it, that would be great. But it raises the question, I think it would be so great to hear from you all as artists. What and how have you seen this evolve since the 70s or the 90s? What has been the role of Chicano's art scholars, the writers, the art historians, the critics, in your own practice, or as you've just seen it in the field? And it's also a plug for USLAF's writing series, X's Intersection, which pairs emerging and mid-career and established writers with our awardees to write short pieces about them. But I would love to hear your take on the scholarship.
Well, I'll say I am forever hungry for new scholarship. So when I can get to a conference or when I can jump on a Zoom and hear multiple people sharing about an unpublished paper and understanding where we are at the present moment, it helps me understand where and how conversations and perceptions are being challenged, where and how definitions are being broken open, and what are some of the larger questions that are floating amongst us. I work very closely with a number of scholars and will reach out after I've seen a panel to get a paper. And sometimes you have to wait for years to get the paper because the conference publication won't be done for years. And I mean, that was the case with Erin Stone, who's writing one of the critical essays for my book. I saw her give a paper at the Mayor Symposium in Denver in 2019 and finally got the book last year, I'll say that it is a true inspiration and nourishment to hear the work of our contemporary Chicano and Latinx art historians and historians. And it's what fuels these kinds of conversations and collaborations. Because while the work is inspired by the news and what we're living through, it's to understand how we can process that and engage with some of these larger critical questions that are posed by scholars within a variety of institutions and contexts.
I will, John, Josh get you that essay. Yeah, like I definitely understand the importance of scholarly work, but personally, it's not my thing, which is why I resisted reading that essay that my daughter sent me, especially during the summertime. Um, there's nothing for me like hearing from the artists, so to be able to have Harry Gamboa Jr. come here and talk about all that stuff um, from his perspective, nothing could top that. Seeing that show at Jumex Museum of Gabriel Orozco was like was worth so much more than reading a bunch of essays. Like that work was like the artist on the ground making these interventions, and that's my language. That's what speaks to me, and more than scholarly work, like the art language. And I think that these two people, they did it in a very amazing way that was very, very practical and very impactful. And yeah, sort of like in a makeshift kind of way too. Both of those artists, right? They did it in that way. And to me, that's worth way so much more than an essay, because it speaks my visual language that I speak.
Yeah, scholarly. Some I don't really read a lot. I like the fact that they condense and concise, have a an opinion, scholastic opinion about what's going on. I know Harry since we were in our 20s, and you're right. Talking to him and experiencing life, separations, divorces, children at the same age, and we meet once. He's always fascinating. We meet once a year, and as a group of us turning the same year, the same age at the same year, it's sort of a ritual. I'm really blessed to know him, and I know Gronk, and I know Pax. I know them all actually. I know those four, and when they write about them, man, people come up with. That's what you guys do. You come up with. I won't say fairy tales. That might be rude. You come up with very insightful. Like, I didn't think of it that way. I didn't think of it that way. You know how things approach. So I just see when back in the day when Gronk and Harry were walking down the street and there's a police thing down the way and they put the flares up. Gronk, lay down over there. And like, click, and it becomes this. You're talking about iconic imagery, but you know how it's done. And the way Patsy with her friends would become glamorous using thrifty drugstore makeup and look all like, just how beautiful that they would look with this stuff and the paper dresses. And then you guys write about it. Go, oh, wow, yeah, look at you, It's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother conceptual art pieces. There's some of these scholastic creeds, what do they call them? Screeds or whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's fun. It's all part of it. Oh, and the other thing about the whole Chicano thing and generational, I thought about when you guys were talking. We basically realized that we have a certain theme, we live this life, and these things happen to us as a cultural entity. And generational, the opportunities always happen to the next generation. Opportunities, scholastics. We never thought about curators, the younger people that are curators, and they join these museums. In LA, it's LACMA, MoCA, the Hammer, and maybe even the Huntington, and they're letting us in the museums, where before we were never, and we're used to it.
And the Smithsonian.
They don't even allow it in a gallery, and that's why we did muralism. Besides fighting graffiti, which graffiti becomes the mural, if you live long enough, it's like everything becomes like this development. So when I call myself a dinosaur, because I'm at a certain age where you see all this stuff. There's nobody sitting around me at a campfire, but we have stories, of the things, and people are, moving on to the next realm as we speak. There's, people are, what's your health like, and all that kind of stuff. Those are the, how much medicine do I want to take, stuff like that. Anyway, I know I ramble, but you know what I'm trying to say. And then you guys write about it. The younger generations write about it and create this other stuff. I think it's enjoyable.
Thank goodness, right? So it's a whole other kind of creativity
Right. Yes, it is.
involved in looking back and looking at you. Well, I think it's time to sort of start closing up here. And I want to thank everybody who has participated today in this presentation. X as intersection, Chicanx expressions. I also want to take this moment to thank the 3 artists who are with us today. Excellent. This was wonderful hearing you all talk amongst yourselves. And of course, I want to thank the US Latinx Art Forum for bringing us together here. Babia Collective for doing the interpretations, and of course, Ford Foundation and Mellon Foundation for making this all happen. And in closing, kind of listening to what was being said today, I invite everybody watching to maybe set aside a little bit of time this week and contemplate the importance and the fundamental relationship between the arts and democracy, because it's there. Thank you. Everybody have a great evening.
All right. All right. Thanks.
Thank you all.